Welcome to Last in Line podcast, where we are highlighting, showcasing, and spotlighting great leaders of faith who have overcome adversity, cultivated resilience, and served others in a significant capacity. So settle in and be encouraged by this episode of Last in Line podcast. We are at war spiritually. If you haven't ever quite fully comprehended that or understood how to approach that battle and tactically, strategically engage in that war, I've created a simple handbook, guidebook, roadmap that is straightforward, simple, short, but it's extremely useful and might serve you in this battle of spiritual warfare. It's called Operation 333, the Little Black Book on Strategic Spiritual Warfare. Grab a copy today. Hey, gentlemen, I would like to welcome our guest at Last in Line podcast, Mr. Seth Studley. He and his wife, Melanie, have created a marriage coaching program. Seth is a licensed therapist, and we have a great discussion about their marriage and how they were on the rocks and being a therapist and still fighting for your marriage, close to divorce, getting punched in the face by your spouse. These kinds of things seemed pretty ironic to Seth at the time. And so they developed courses that are real for real married couples who want real answers, living in a real world. And they're very straightforward. Seth is very transparent about how bad it got with their marriage. He's very open about his shortcomings and faults, and what I like is that he's very authentic about the fact that he does not have all the answers, but he has the license and the clinical training to be able to approach problem solving and therapy from a real world approach and a logical approach, and from his experiences. He and his wife Melanie have 5 million downloads, actually probably more than that at this point. They are worldwide. They've created several resources like the Power Couple Planner, Back to Basics Boot Camp, the 7 B's for getting ready. They've got so many different coaching resources and groups. He has a mastermind called the Badass Husband Mastermind. And so we're going to dive into marriage, dive into faith. We're going to dive into his journey as a Christian man and what his thoughts are on masculinity as we lead our families and our wives. So with that, help me welcome Seth Studley to Last in Line podcast. Well, Seth Studley, hey, welcome to Last in Line podcast, man. Glad to have you.
Yes, sir, man. How's it going? Thank you so much for having me on, and look forward to the conversation, man.
It's going good. So we were talking, and I heard you on Ryan Mickler's podcast, and man, you got a great story, and you guys tell it so well too. I mean, you guys probably, you yin and yang, you and your wife, that is, really well off each other, and I know you have a coaching business together, a marriage coaching business. I want to dive into some of your background, but we're going to do something kind of off the cuff. First couple questions here. We're just going to have a little fun and kind of get to see behind the curtain with you. I know you're a licensed therapist. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Licensed marriage and family therapist. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. We're going to dig into that because, man, do I have a lot of questions. I've been married 28 years, and we have 4 children from the ages of 15 to 25. And so it's not my first rodeo, but I feel like I'm learning something every day, and I don't see how that's possible as long as I've been doing it. But You'll help me out, and you'll fix me before the end of this conversation. So, all right,
we'll see. Maybe you'll fix me. I don't know.
Here you go, man. I want you to complete the sentences for me here, and it'll give the audience kind of an idea where you're coming from. So, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Before marriage, I wish someone would have told me.
Oh, man, that's good. Before marriage, I wish someone would have told me to slow down and pay attention.
To your wife, no doubt.
To my wife, but also to myself and the impact that my choices the choices that I make and don't make, the impact on other people and how big that can be. Because for so long, I was just like running through life. Just if I wanted to do it, I'd do it, and kind of not like a disregard for other people's feelings, but just like, hey, I got to get my own. Just kind of a very lone wolf kind of perspective. I was taking, and sometimes I still battle that a lot. But yeah, I wish somebody would have told me, hey man, slow down. The lone wolf, you can go fast, but you won't go far. I wish somebody
That's
had told me
great.
that.
That's great advice. I would also probably tell them, hey, that saying they have of ask, forgiveness over permission, sometimes that doesn't always work out real good. And people say that with like a badge of honor. And I've done that way too many times. And I wish someone would have said, hey, take notice of that advice. That may not be good in every situation. So we'll dig in.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another one. Ways I've become a better communicator with my spouse
Mm.
are.
Are knowing what I want. So if I
Mm,
can be clear and articulate what I want and what I don't want, then first of all, I have to communicate that to myself and not just go off of feelings or the things I've known, and we just continue to do what we go to what we know, I would be a communicator, a better communicator if I would say, hey, Seth, formulate this plan, be very concise in what you want first, and then share that with Melanie, my wife. And that is how I could be a better communicator. What are my standards? What are my black and whites? What is my path that I want to go on? And not saying, hey, it's my way or the highway. Not saying that at all. It's like, oh, this is what I prefer. This is what I don't prefer. And there's a lot of room for growth, to listen to the other person in that too. But yeah, I think it first starts with me knowing what I want, being super solid in myself, and then letting that go forth out of me.
yeah. I think we're pretty quick to know what we don't want. But it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to quantify and like articulate the things we do respond to the
Mm-hmm.
best. And
Yeah.
you're right. Like if my wife were to come to me and sit down and say, how can I love you better? I'd be like, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
have no idea. I mean, we don't always
Right.
know what we want. We just know what we don't want, or we know how quick we can be to say somebody's not doing X. So
Yeah, exactly. Now, is that helpful, especially in the context of marriage? Hey, your wife comes to you, hey babe, what do you want? Well, I don't know what I want, but here's what I don't want. Don't do this and don't do that. That leaves them not knowing. I mean, it tells them what not to do, but it doesn't tell them what to do. That's like a waiter coming up to you and saying, all right, sir, may I take your order? Well, I don't want a hamburger.
there you go.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't want French fries. I don't want this. All right. We have several other things in the menu. What would you like? And if we put it in that context, nobody would do that at a restaurant, would we? So just
No.
knowing what you want first and then letting that come out of you. That's how I
and
would be a better
and
communicator.
obviously, and this being in therapy more than I do, but it almost puts a defensive connotation on it too, of what I don't want is this. Okay, well now I'm going to walk on eggshells to try not and do those things, right? Instead of being, hey, it'd be
Right.
nice if we went this direction, and then she can be proactive, or we can be proactive and take initiative, because the other
Yeah.
part is just like reaction. I'm not going to do this, instead of I'm going to do this, and because I know he likes it.
Right.
So um,
Absolutely. And I think you're going to like this one. It makes me think of this phrase, clarity is kindness,
hmm,
right? You could even say clarity is loving. So if I can be clear and articulate to my kids, my family, especially my wife, that is a way to love them. Hey, I prefer this, do this, or don't do that. Like clarity is kindness. So
yeah,
if we can do that, that's a notch in our belt for sure.
absolutely. All right, here's one more for a little bit of fun, and then we'll dive in. God is working on me most in the area of.
Oh, I can answer that instantly. Trusting God with everything, right? Allowing God to go first, not me having a plan. Oh, this is a good financial plan. We should do this and move this money around and do this, or this with the business or whatever. Nope. Halt. Quick stop, right? allow God to go first, trust in God, let go of the perceived control that I think I need or have,
Mhm.
and allow God to go first in all things, and then trust God. So that's
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I mean, those words obviously are a lot easier coming out of our mouth than the actions that follow those. So I would
Yeah.
wonder, is there anything you feel like you need the most growth in where you're seeking God for that? Like some area that maybe you feel like the learning curve is a little steeper for you when it comes to relationship, marriage?
I think it goes back to trusting God and allowing God to go first. And it's not like, okay, God, your will be done. But like I have all kinds of ideas all the time. Oh, this will be good. And we can go this way and this way. Be patient and sit on it for a second. I was even
Mm,
thinking like on my outdoor workout yesterday. I was like, what would it look like? Okay, I have an idea or something. I think about it, kind of formulate it, pray about it, and then just put it on shelf for 7 days and then come back to it. Okay, what did I learn? How was God speaking to me during that time? Did God say anything to me? Was my heart leaning this way or that way? Okay, then examine that. And if nothing, then all right, that's just an idea. We'll leave it on the shelf. If not, then pursue it more. Pursue it
yeah.
a little bit more until it comes to something, or you realize like, okay, that's not the path God wants me to take that way. But just for me, like slowing down, trusting God, I
Yeah.
need to do that daily. I don't know about for you or your listeners. It's like if I don't, it's like it's like working out, man. It's like I got to have a routine. I got to lean into this daily. Otherwise it gets old, it gets rusty,
Yeah.
it stagnates, So for me, I'm like, okay, trusting God every hour, every day, every morning. What's the routine? And that really helps me personally.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. And that helps because I would say a lot of guys I know, speaking about myself specifically, I would struggle with
Mm-hmm.
putting that thing on the shelf for 7 days. And maybe that's even more of a confirmation that I need to work on that is the
Right.
higher the climb and the steeper the learning curve, probably the area I need to work on. And I agree with you because guys are like, okay, I'm passionate about this. It sounds like a good idea. I could serve people, even if it's a good intention in serving somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going after
Mm-hmm.
it instead of, hold on, that might just be like spicy salsa I ate yesterday kind of backing up on me. Maybe that's not God,
Right.
So I'm with you. That's a great point. I just need to work on being patient and sitting still and kind of waiting to hear more from him because he won't let it leave you if it really is from him, right?
Right. Right. I mean, if God's put this idea in your mind, in your heart, then I don't believe it's just going to be like, okay, now figure it out. It's a really super crazy hard idea, but just figure it out. No, it's okay, trust God and He'll provide the way, the people to talk to, the networking, the resources, the whatever, and then you can go forward. But man, yeah, I think we're similar in that way.
Yeah.
Leaving it on the shelf for 7 days would just give me anxiety. It's like, well, I got to move now. It's like, well, what if I don't? And this and this, I'm going to miss out. Like,
Yeah.
no, slow it down, Seth. Slow it
That's
down.
good, man. That's good. So I appreciate your perspective on that. Because we all need to be more patient. I get the answer a lot of patience. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing I'm looking for, is more of that. So go into your background, kind of run down the list of pre-therapy certification, why therapy certificate, why a passion for married couples and coaching, and kind of where you came from, man. Any things with your
Mm-hmm.
upbringing and fathers, if you had a good father that's look up to as a leader, who you had as mentors, as leaders, kind of take us down that road for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I am originally from South Carolina, grew up in the mountains, in the upstate of South Carolina, lived there for about 25 years, and then got an undergraduate degree in psychology and grew up Christian, and just kind of, in the Bible Belt, that area, everybody's Christian, everybody went to church. That didn't necessarily mean that they were, doing right or whatnot. And you sound like you got an accent, so you probably know what I'm saying.
Yes,
In
sir.
that
Yes, sir.
kind of Southern culture there, and so grew up in the church, Pentecostal actually, Church of God, stuff like that. And then I was in a couple of different bands during high school and college. And after college, me and my buddies said, "Hey, let's pursue this music thing full time, right?" So then we just packed up and moved to Seattle. and didn't know anybody here, didn't have nothing here. We just saved a little bit of money, drove cross country. Let's do this thing. And then, long story short, we got a record deal and got signed, did touring all over the U.S. For a couple of years. And then I said, I had my girlfriend at the time, is my wife, Melanie, and it just wasn't working out being on the road, 8 months out of the year. So I was like, okay, I'm going to quit and go to graduate school. And then went to graduate school out here in Seattle. And then I've always been fascinated with psychology and the mind and stuff like that. And always been in the helping profession. So that's why I chose marriage and family therapy, and then started doing that, but going back to like mentors and stuff like that. My father, my dad, he's still alive. Good dad, worked hard, provided and stuff like that, but he didn't have a role model. And well, he did have a role model, just a really bad one as a dad, right? His dad walked out on him, alcohol, all kinds of stuff when he was young. So he just kind of had to fend for himself, and he got into some stuff that wasn't really helpful, right? He became a Christian, which was great. But then even that wasn't much of a leader in that way, and we're all leaders, either good ones or bad ones, right? So, we can say what leader he was, but it never really came from a place of assertiveness or self-confidence or really doing the right thing. He did the right thing by like working and, coming home and, taking us and doing stuff like that. But it was, I needed something a little more than that, I believe. And I have 2 boys and 1 daughter, and I try to give them that something more, right? We good dads, I think we want to provide what we didn't have, if that's like financial or anything, which I think like the emotional and spiritual leadership is far more important than the financial piece, but also that's a big piece too. And we want to give our children more than what we had, and if we're aware of it and we know what to do, then we can do it, which is a good thing. But yeah, so been married 19 years to Melanie. Long story short, our marriage was a train wreck while I was training to be a marriage and family therapist. And I had been looking at pornography, not like addicted or anything, but just here and there, kind of like things that I think culture would be like, oh, what's the big deal, right?
Yeah.
But if you're Christian, you want to set yourself apart, it is a big deal, right? Yep. It's that stuff like that isn't helpful to your marriage, right? And we were in church at the time, leading worship and all this stuff. And Melanie had asked me, said, hey, do you struggle with this stuff? And, of course, like a lot of guys, I was embarrassed. I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I didn't just want to, crush her spirit. And I was like, no, I'm good, right? So I kind of lied. Not kind of lied. I covered it up. I did lie. Say, no, we're good, right? And then I felt convicted after that a couple weeks later and confessed. I'm like, hey, man, or not, man. I like, hey, babe, I've been doing this and I need to come clean and confess. And she was 2 weeks postpartum with our second boy. So timing was terrible, right? I could have done it a far more graceful way. And that just kind of like kicked off a real kind of hell on earth for us for about 1.5 years, 2 years. Long story short, we would argue every single day. Terrible train wreck. She punched me in the face, which we talked about it on Mickler's podcast. And eventually we got through that with counseling, with a lot of pastoral biblical help and real counseling, not just like, hey, pray about it, it'll go away kind of stuff, which is great. But that sometimes we need more than that, right? So we surrounded ourselves with godly people, made sure that we were in the Word, praying all the time, and we got through it. And so that's how our podcast, Anatomy of Us, was birthed. We looked at each other one day and said, hey, how in the world did we get through that stuff? Oh, we did. It was with Jesus' help. Let's talk about it because other people can use this and it can be helpful, right? And that was 6 years ago, I believe, 7 years ago when our first episode aired, Valentine's Day. I don't remember the year, maybe 2016 or 2017. I don't remember, but that's the very, very short version of where we are today.
That's good.
I've been married 19 years. I've been a therapist about 15 years. So yeah.
That's good. I mean, I think God uses those darkest moments, to create a message that you've got that you can share because you did come out on the other side. And there's a lot of people stuck right in the middle of that storm and they need to know that there's hope. And from what I heard on, you guys talk about that journey, it got pretty dark and it got pretty stormy and, not even just the physical thing that she, obviously she had a little bit of a hall pass because she was a little bit hormonal, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say other things, can create that darkness of just not being on the same page, constantly at each other, constantly adversarial and confrontational. And our fuses get short. I mean, when things are not aligned with God's word, with God's situation. I know y'all were Christians, but still you can get off track. I wanted to ask, back to your faith journey, like you grew up, it sounds like, obviously in the Bible Belt, but did you have a moment where you sort of were kind of like, I don't know if it's a defining spiritual moment or one of those moments where you're like, okay, I'm going to grab onto this as mine. Like this was my parents' faith. This was the faith around me. This is what I was just sort of immersed in, but now it's mine. And this is why I love Jesus. This is why I chase him. What, did you have anything similar that it kind of went down that road?
Yeah, I did. So growing up in the Bible Belt, it's like, and people familiar with Southern culture, at least Christian culture, will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you go to church on Sunday, Wednesday, all this stuff. But on the other days, you might be out drinking, you're talking, you're doing stuff with women. All this is like we got two faces, right? This is my church face, these are my church clothes, but these are the other times, right? And I grew up like that, so always knowing, always believing in Jesus. He says who he says he is, and also feeling convicted when we would go out drinking or doing this stuff or doing just stuff that we knew we shouldn't be, right? It's like always having that weird tension, So grew up and lived with that for a very long time, got married, same kind of situation. And then one of the defining moments, like before you were talking about, you've been married for a long time, you're just learning stuff every day. I think that's just a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
One of the defining moments was when it was one of the scariest nights. It's after the confession in our marriage and stuff like that. And me and Melanie, I said, we went through about a year and a half of hell. I promise you, we did a whole podcast about it. It's season 1. You guys can go check it out. A podcast about it. The title is Hide the Guns, right? Because Melanie was so enraged and we'd been fighting and arguing for so long. I thought that Melanie was going to kill me in my sleep if I went to sleep, I'm not going to wake up, right?
Sure.
So, and it sounds kind of over dramatic, but it's not. Trust me. I mean, when things get crazy, they can get crazy. We've probably all been there. So I hit all the ammo and stuff like that. And she's not super familiar with guns. So I was like, okay, she's not going to know what to do. But I didn't want to take any chances. And I barricaded myself in one of our rooms, right? And she was just beating on the door. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? And I remember on my knees, it's like 2 a.m. on my knees. And I'm like, God, everything that I have done, all the stuff I know with the, academic knowledge, counseling, and all that stuff, everything that I've done has not worked. You are all I have. I give it all to you, every single thing to you. On my knees, crying, right? I mean, grown man, 2 kids, wife is going berserk, right? That was one of the moments when I said, okay, I can't do this. Where's it gotten me? What is my situation currently right now? I think my wife is going to kill me. I had to hide the guns. I barricaded myself so she couldn't get in. Right? So
things have been better.
Right?
Things have been better.
Things have exactly. This is not my finest moment, but in our weakness, God can show himself. Yeah. God is strongest, right? Like the little kid song, we are weak, but he is strong kind of thing.
Yeah.
And boom, that is one of the points where my life changed, my perspective and my reliance on God, and I'll tell you another one happened just in November of 2022, right? So we have the podcast, we're rolling, we're doing all this stuff, right? But I had gotten a really long ways from God, right? But God was pulling me back. And it's the story of the prodigal son, he's like, hey, come home, come back to me, and I have sons, right? And one's 15 and 14. I have sons, and there is nothing that they could do or couldn't do that if they came back to me and said, Dad, I am sorry. I love you. I've made so many mistakes. Please let me in and feed me. What would we do as a dad?
Sure.
Of course, you'd say, all right, son, I don't condone anything you've done or anything or whatever, but come back. I forgive you. Right.
Yep.
And this was in November of 2022. God was working on me big time because I went very far away. Right. And I don't know why, but I just
can I jump in here? for a
Yeah.
guy, maybe there's a guy in a similar, or maybe he's teetering on taking that step off the path of his spiritual life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what, if you're comfortable talking about, like, what was it that made you just kind of, because it sounded like you were on fire, after the bedroom situation. I know
Mm-hmm.
it's a up and down journey. The spiritual walk is hard. Was there something that maybe just triggered you to go kind of haywire? I mean,
Yeah.
help somebody with that right now if you can.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up to give it context. So, um, we were in church. We went to a church called Mars Hill out here in
Yeah.
Seattle. Your
Yeah.
listeners may have heard of it.
Oh yeah.
It was a big church, right? And it was really big on forming men, on leadership, and like, okay, let's go, let's do this, which was awesome, right? And like young men like myself just went there in droves and thousands. And we went there for 10 years, right? So we were
Mm-hmm.
pretty in the system of the church. And boom, the church just imploded, just
Mm-hmm.
went away. And that was the, I guess, the kicker of like, oh man, what is this? Right. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, you know, was I putting my faith in one earthly man
Yeah.
and not Jesus? Yeah. So okay, that's a mistake, first of all, right? We're human, we fall short, right? And
Yeah.
so did this pastor. Although he did a lot of good things, he really screwed a lot of people over,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking bad about him. I'm just saying it was what it was when we were there at the time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then boom, we didn't go to church for probably 5 years. Hated church. Oh, so stupid. Not hated God. Did not hate God or
Wow.
Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But did not like church. Worship music sucked. Everything sucked. It's like I didn't even know where my Bible was. I think we'd moved it, at one point. I'm like, what? I don't even know. I didn't even think about it. We didn't go to church on Easter. We didn't go to church ever, right? So I went far away, and then I was not trying out like other religions or anything like that, but just thinking, oh yeah, it's cool, and we're out here in Seattle. I mean, we're kind of out in the country,
Mm-hmm.
on the outskirts of Seattle, but everybody's kind of
Yeah.
super liberal and all this stuff out here, and that really got to me. It just, I mean, over 4, 5, 6 years, something can get to you if you don't have that North Star, if you don't have that beacon that you're always pointing back to, right?
It's good.
And I didn't. And God started working on me through, I mean, 2022 was pretty hard, with like mental health. I was, having some anxiety, some depression, just feeling overwhelmed. I quit my full-time job of, being in full-time therapist, supervisor, clinical work, all this stuff, to do our own thing, our coaching business in that. And of course, that's stressful in itself, right? But just anxiety, depression, all this stuff. And then God just started working on me, man. And there were
Mm.
so many coincidences that I could not explain away with anything, right? And that started in right around November, right around Thanksgiving time of 2022. And then I said, let's go back to church, right? And I was like, I'm going to find my Bible. Started reading the Bible. I was like, you know what? I'm going to read Jesus' words. All right, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's what I started with, right? And of course, it has the Christmas story, and it
Yeah.
coincided real time with like, okay, this was right after Thanksgiving, and the stuff that I was reading in the Bible, the preacher would talk about, and
Yeah.
there was just so many crazy coincidences. I was like, he's saying everything that I read this morning, and I hadn't been to church in like 5 years, and I wasn't talking to him, and there were just so many things that like I could not explain away. And God was just pulling me back. And the prodigal son, and like having my own sons myself, I'm like, there is no way in the world that I would not accept my son back. If he came to me with a contrite heart saying, Dad, I'm sorry. I know this is wrong. I love you. Can I come back in, your house and give me a warm plate of food? There's no way in heck that I would not say no. And that is exactly what God did for me. And that
Mm.
just crushed me in a good way. Right.
Wow.
So boom, coming back to him, and like,
That's really
yeah, and
recent.
we're,
That's
man,
really recent. Wow.
yeah,
Uh,
it was I don't know, less than 6 months. Well, I guess 8 months. Well, probably 9
that's
months ago, but that
that's
is really recent, right?
crazy. Golly.
It is
Well,
crazy. Yeah.
I mean,
But whew, man.
you could tell his hand was on you at that point, and he obviously, you had kind of drifted off, and we all do. I mean, I know what you're going through, and but he doesn't stop as long as our heart is still kind of posture toward him, which it probably was. Yours probably was. It did never left him. Your disciplines and your behaviors and actions and the things you were serving him wasn't necessarily on your radar. But I'm glad you went into that. I appreciate that, because there might be somebody in that, hey, we idolized a man in the pulpit and he let us down. And so I equate that to God letting me down. So I'm going this way because that didn't work out. I think that's fairly common, more common than we think. So no, I appreciate you going into that. Man, let's transition a little bit into, I know you're a fitness nut, and I am a weight throwing junkie, and I see your shirt, and I know you've done 75 hard, like, I don't know, 6 or 7 times. I mean, you're kind of obsessed with that. I mean, talk to me about how you got on that journey. Have you always been sort of that extreme, push my body, break myself down kind of guy?
Well, no, not real. I mean, I did, I lettered in wrestling in high school, like 4 years of high school wrestling, so that was when I first started like getting into, I guess, body stuff, like, hey, let's hit the gym, let's, be fit and stuff like that. And then always have liked the outdoors, hiking, hunting, fishing, snowboarding, skiing, just outdoor stuff, right? I've always felt at peace, like outdoors, and that started in South Carolina, like just being out in the woods and the Appalachian Mountains, just beautiful, right? And of course, Pacific Northwest is beautiful as well out here, minus the rain. But I've liked doing, I have liked kind of testing my body, right? And I think for most guys, it is easier to push our body and test our body than it is to push our minds and our intellect or our feelings, right? I tell Melanie all the time, and the dudes that I talk to, it's like, I would rather walk barefoot in the snow with glass under my feet, carrying a 100-pound rucksack than sometimes talk about feelings or talk about the past or like emotional things that I have to work on, because it's easy to lift weights, just get on the bench and, go rather, or, you can like sit and talk about your feelings. That doesn't sound fun to me. Right. And I'm a therapist. Right. So, but getting into my buddy told me about 75 hard a couple years ago. And the first time I heard about 75 hard, I was like, no way, man. I can't do that. That's crazy. And then it kind of goes in cycles. You think about it. Like, okay, maybe I could try it out, And then of course you see the benefits of it. And right now, this is the 5th time that I've done it. I've done it probably 8 times. One time I got COVID and was in bed for 7 days, so I failed then. Another time was just poor planning. We were remodeling a house and it was too crazy. But this is the fifth time that I've done it. I'll complete this time. Me and Melanie are doing it together, and this is day 50. But I mean, man, the things that you are capable of and how you feel mentally and physically when you're paying attention to your body and what you put in your body is so worth it, And and maybe your listeners have struggled with this. I've struggled with alcohol in the past, because just kind of numbing out, drinking too much, and that stuff really catches up with you. It's like, I'm too tired to play with my kids. I put on 15 pounds. I got a beer belly now. What's the deal? You just feel like crap. You sleep like crap. And not being in that mindset of hey, just do whatever, eat whatever, drink whatever, not being in that mindset is so much more. It's more clear. You're more focused. You feel 100% better. And people think, I don't have time to do that. But I promise you, when you commit to something like that, time kind of expands and you make time for it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You don't think, I got a, outside workout and it's going to, it's 11 p.m. Oh man, there's no way I could do that. No, you just do it. You don't think about it. And then you sleep good. And that instills confidence, that instills all kinds of emotional and health benefits too, but also spiritual benefits in my opinion.
That's real good. I mean, Andy would tell you, Andy Frisella would tell you, COVID's no excuse for dropping out. So you don't get to use that, but no, it's cool that you're doing that, man.
Dude, I was laid up. Yeah.
You're doing that together too. That's great. That's awesome. I think, I mean, you tell me, you're the guy with the license and certification on the wall. You tell me, but guys, if we can quantify our pain, we're more likely to embrace it almost. But when it comes to emotions, things that don't appeal to our 5 senses, things we can't touch and hold and explain, we want no part of that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so it's
Mhm.
kind of why I think guys struggle with spiritual warfare and spiritual battle. I think because we can't see it, we can't quantify the enemy, can't touch him,
Mhm.
can't punch him in the face. I think we just ignore it and
Right.
we just assume it's not there. But no, I love it. I think guys that do work to their bodies and break themselves, it's scriptural. It says, I break my body down. Paul talks about how I make my body into submission, break it into submission. So,
Mhm.
no, I think can you give our listeners some encouragement when it comes to how your health physically has equated downstream to a healthier marriage, or has it?
Yeah, it has. And I think so. I want to just go back to the thing that you said, like even from like maybe a psychological perspective,
Mm-hmm.
how guys we like to quantify things. It's like, okay, I got two of these, not one. If I need
Mm-hmm.
three, I know what I got to do to go get the third one or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But feelings and emotions are not that black and white. Like Melanie for years would say, hey, what are you thinking? And I could never, never even, I don't know. I'm thinking 8 billion things. If I even started, then that will go on a tangent to this and this and this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't quantify it, right? Or if she said, hey, how's your body feeling right now? I could be like, I feel good. I feel lean. I feel strong. And it's a result of this because I got up and ran, or like, did a slow carb diet or whatever. That's way easier, right? So we like guys, and if I'm being stereotypical here, I don't care. It's just my experience and most
Yeah.
of the other dudes I've talked to. So something's got to be true about it. We like to control certain things. That's why I love 75 hard. It's no questions. It's either you did the workouts, you stuck to all the things, or you didn't. Yes or no, black and white. I can work with that all day, right? It's not confusing. But when guys can get an emotional handle on things black and white, how you feeling? So, and we're not taught this stuff either, maybe
No.
from family of origin or culture.
No.
We're just not taught this stuff, right? So I've used a lot of like tangible, there's a bunch of different iterations of this, but it's like a feelings wheel. Usually I would use them with kids when I did therapy, but they're really great for guys too. It's like has all
Mm-hmm.
these emotions on there, like, hey, what are you feeling? Oh, I'm angry. And then that has a whole subset of stuff. Oh, are you frustrated? Are you sad? Are you lonely?
Mm-hmm.
Are you in pain or whatever? Usually it comes out as anger for dudes, right? But stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, using that as a guide can be so helpful. So, but going back to your point, if we can control our bodies, master our bodies, right? Then that is a first step. It's kind of like how the Bible talks about fasting. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you're controlling your body, right?
Yeah.
And then other lessons can be revealed to you in the suffering and the pain or whatever in the discipline, right? Jocko Willink talks about discipline equals freedom,
Yeah.
right? So if I can have body discipline to get up at a certain time, run a mile, or hit the weights or do whatever, it doesn't matter what kind of
Mm-hmm.
exercise you do, just move your body, right? Then that equates into freedom and discipline in other areas, right? So
Mm-hmm.
marriage discipline. Oh, I am disciplined now because I've mastered my body at least, and I don't think we master it really. We just kind of get better at it the more you have practice and routine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm going to be disciplined to go on that date night every single Friday night, or have that connection time with my wife every single day. You know what I'm saying? So it
Yeah.
just kind of goes down river. It goes downstream. It's like, okay, control my body, now it's going to be easier to control, or you're going to be more aware to control everything else, if that
Yeah,
makes
because
sense.
we're not afraid of uncomfortable at that point. We're
Mm-hmm.
accustomed to uncomfortable physically, and we're not shying away from maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation or an interaction that's going to require sacrifice, right? If we're
Right.
sacrificing ourselves physically, we're more likely to think, I mean, that's nothing. I could take her on a date night every week. That's not hard because I did this. I
Yeah.
just squatted in the garage for an hour and I'm about to die. So that looks pretty easy over here. So yeah, you're positioning yourself to be able to withstand more discomfort, I guess is a way of saying it.
Yeah. And it provides consistency
Mm-hmm.
too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, anybody can work out and do squats for an hour, once a year. Okay, we'll do that every day.
Yeah.
you know build that routine, that consistency. Then like I said, that's going to go downstream into like, okay, check-in time with kids, date night with wife. That's going to go, okay, we don't miss a Bible study or reading with your spouse
Mm-hmm.
in the morning. We pray together. And I lead that, just like you lead yourself. Nobody's going to make you do those squats. Nobody's going to make you pray and lead your wife in that way either.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you.
That's right. That's good, man. Good add-on right there. All right. Well, let's transition a little bit into the Anatomy of Us, which is your website, your podcast with your wife, Melanie. You guys are an awesome tandem. I think you guys, like I said earlier, you guys feed off each other and complement each other very well in your conversations. I like the part where you guys were talking about how when you're doing interviews and we can't see anything below the neck, you're tapping each other like, hey, you talk here,
Yeah.
Hey, so tell me give me an idea as we go into some of the work you're doing, and then we'll get into how to hire you guys or how to find your resources. What would she say if I were to ask her about your growth as a husband, let's say in the last 6 to 12 months? What would she say is her biggest, I guess, the biggest thing she's noticed?
I'm a 10 out of 10. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no doubt.
This is a good question because it's be like, okay, I think your listeners will know if I'm like trying to make stuff up or struggling here. But I think that Melanie would look at me and say, I see him having a growth mindset. I see him working towards that one goal, that shared vision. Oftentimes with clients, we help clients create a shared vision of the marriage. What do you both want? Where do you both want to go in the marriage? And I would say that she would say he's doing the best he can with what he has. Struggles sometimes, right? And I got to get my head, out of where it shouldn't be sometimes. But on the whole, always moving towards that goal, I would say. Now, that doesn't mean things are perfect. That doesn't mean that I think like the more you know and the more you grow, sometimes you learn how much you don't know and how much you still need to grow, kind of thing. I think it's an evolving process.
Good.
It's like, of course, nobody's perfect. And but I mean, this is a good question. She would say, yeah, his heart is in the right place, and when he's doing right, using the systems, first of all, like, are you following Jesus close?
Yeah.
Are you right there? And then everything can go down, right? And she knows it, just like most of our wives know it when, like, okay, something's up, something's going on. Are you kind of veering off the path? What's the deal here? She would know that, but I think we are striving towards just increased trust, increased companionship, increased relationship, closer to God, closer to one another. That's what I think she would say. And I can honestly say that same about her, which I think is a pretty good place to be in.
That's good, man. That's a great it's a good place to be. I mean, considering where you guys started as well. And I mean, we've been through some rocky stuff too. I mean, 28 years, you don't get to 28 years without some turbulence. And so we have similar to you guys. And so I just was curious what you think, because sometimes, I mean, you hear in interviews all the time, like I've been in leadership where I've interviewed people, and I've had interviews where they're like, what would your current boss say about you? Or, one of those things, what does your best friend say about you? So I just was curious what you think she would say, because when you can get in her shoes and see yourself, you're likely able to be like, oh, she might say that, and I didn't really think of that, so I might want to focus on that, one of those things. So it helps us with perspective. Let me ask you this. When it comes to spouses, okay, sometimes we get the lines blurred between connection and communication. We think if we're just communicating that we're connecting, and that's not always the case. I mean, we can say a lot of words and we're exchanging information, but that doesn't mean we're connecting on a level that's optimal for the growth we're talking about. What has made you guys great connectors kind of over that baseline of communicating?
That's a really good point, because communication does not equal connection. Like, I could communicate to Melanie, hey, get some milk and eggs and, I don't know, cheese on the way home. Right? That's just communicating. Now, if I said, hey, I love you so much, and I noticed that we're out of eggs, and I make you eggs every single morning. Would you please stop and get some eggs so I can make them for you? I want to make sure that you're good to go.
Wow.
That's connecting, right? Because the difference in that is, and I'll talk about this other thing we have in a minute, being seen, being heard, and being understood, and feeling safe is some of the key components for females, like things that they need: seen, heard, respected, and safe, right? And we have this thing, I think we talked about it a little bit on Mickler's show, about the power list that we have that Melanie created. And it's let's see, I don't have it in the studio, it's on the fridge in there, but it says, okay, safe, seen, soothed, heard, and respected. And then Melanie lists out all those things that make her feel safe, seen, heard, soothed, and respected, right? So there's no question in my mind what she needs to feel those things, and she's telling me those so I can provide them. And of course, I get to do the same thing. It took me longer because it's like it's harder for guys to think about that emotional stuff. But if you can communicate, not just, hey, get the milk, get the eggs, but communicate in a way that shows your spouse that you do see them, that you do hear them, right? That you are a safe person. You're not just going to, chew their head off or be irritated because you had a bad day or whatnot, right? So many guys do that and they just dismiss it. And that, trust me, don't do that, dudes. That doesn't work in the long run. It's not going to get you what you want in the end. And I'm not just talking about like physical stuff. I'm talking about like a real loving relationship with your spouse. But if you can communicate in those ways and highlight those things, it's going to be different for every spouse, right? So it's not just what Melanie needs from me or what I need from her. Ask your spouse, hey, how do you feel seen? How do you feel heard? How do you feel loved? Because you're probably the same. Like all the dudes that you talk to, all the dudes that I talk to, we want to give that to our spouse, right? It is a joy for me to provide those things, to make her feel safe, seen, soothed, heard, and loved. It's like, that's part of my job here. You know what I'm saying? And it feels like $1 million, like a job well done. Like, yes, I did that. And if we can combine those things in our communication, then that is going to equal connection plus communication, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, you got to have one before you can have the other, but just because you have one doesn't always mean you get the other. You got to go that extra step. No, I like that. That's a great analogy with the eggs in the grocery store. That's good. Well, I guess my other question, kind of along with this whole marriage thing, of course, is guys are competitive. I mean, sounds like your wife's probably just as competitive as you, just because she sounds like a very assertive type A, hard charging, like I'm going to win type of person, which me and my wife are similar. We're both only children. So you go with that wherever you want. It took a while to get, unselfish in marriage, but guys are competitive. How do you recommend we step outside of this whole keeping score of, she did this a week ago and I'm going to bring it up in my next argument, that kind of thing. So conflict resolution, let's talk about that a little bit. So both parties do it, but I think guys might be more likely to be like, oh yeah, well, remember when, and then how do we kind of erase that memory, if you will, when it comes to the next disagreement? Because the Bible says you don't keep score, but do you get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I get where you're going. And like it's also, the Bible says, husbands, don't treat your wives harshly, right? Yeah. So it's okay, it's okay to, keep score to a degree, or like be competitive with your buddies and, all this stuff. But in my experience, that has not worked with my particular wife, right? So, and you're supposed to use words, love your wife in ways that build her up, not, keeping score and doing this and that. First of all, just from as a therapist, like keeping score, unless you're playing a game, unless you're on a field, keeping the score, keeping the tally, kind of, oh, you didn't scratch my back, so I'm not going to do yours, and you get to taste your own medicine. That just doesn't work in marriage. I mean, that doesn't work in a lot of other relationships, like in, the corporate world or business or stuff like that. I mean, sometimes it does, but again, it's your wife. It's not your business. It's not, just numbers and spreadsheets and stuff like that. So I would say, hey, first of all, if guys are doing that, I kind of Dr. Phil, like, hey, how's that working for you? Does it actually bring you closer to your spouse when you say, hey, I washed the dishes today, it's your turn, or, with a sarcastic or critical attitude, what kind of response do you think you're going to garner from that? Is she going to say, oh, you're right, thank you so much for reminding me that you kept score, or whatnot? No, it just doesn't work that way. And that isn't, in my experience, isn't conducive to like love or understanding. It's just like, that's not a soft place to land, for your spouse. If you're just keeping score, like, I who knows what, like, I cleaned up the dog crap today, it's your turn. Now, if you have agreed upon that as, a daily kind of disbursement of chores and stuff like that, then okay, that's fine. Just a reminder, hey, I don't know if reminders like that work so well either. That might get old. But definitely not a scorekeeping kind of thing. And what was the last part you said there?
Yeah. Go ahead.
You're talking about communication, right?
Yeah.
And one of the communications that tools that we have is called the clearing structure. Now, we didn't make it up; we kind of adapted it, and I got this from graduate school and all this stuff. And the clearing structure, people can download it on our website, anatomyofus.com, under the resource tab, which we have a bunch of other resources. But it's a communication tool that slows both partners down and highlights exactly what you want from that situation, right? And it uses the concept of I statements, like kind of, put in parentheses I, like, not, rather than say, hey, you never clean up the dog crap, or you always leave it for me to do this, right? What kind of response do you think we might get from that? When we put somebody on the defensive, they're going to respond with defense, right? But if we use an I statement, now I'll just use a silly example. So when you use a clearing structure, it has a series of 6 questions for you to ask, and then even examples for how you can talk to your spouse. So, hey, Melanie, when you don't clean up the dog crap and leave it, just out there for days, and we agreed upon it, it makes me feel like you're kind of ignoring me or not holding up your side of the bargain, right? And then number 2, what I want from that is to know that I can count on you to, do the chores. I'm doing them. This is a partnership. It's not a, dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the third one is what I want from myself. I don't have it in front of me, so it's kind of hard to remember right off bat. What I want from myself is not to have to remind you or feel like I'm kind of, babying you a little bit, or what that reminds me of is like growing up, or like, if I had a other partner, she would just ignore all the stuff I said. And I was just like, felt like I was in this partnership alone. And what I want from you is like a reassurance of like, yep, you're right. We did agree to that, and I'll work on it. You have permission to remind me, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the outcome of speaking to your partner that way, in that style, in that format, is a million times different than saying, hey, you always leave the stupid dog crap on the thing. We might as well sell the dog because this is what are we doing anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then you just have an argument and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No, you're right, because I think obviously not only tone, but intent obviously can put people on the defensive. And if you're together on this and not divisive on this, you're going to choose your words. Like, I think it all goes back to what you said originally, is like slowing down. Slow down. Stop trying to be in a rush to get your point made. You're going to get your notch in the belt and win this argument. Let's stop and think long game, right? Because think how I say this right now is going to determine my next 24 hours. I mean, I could say, personally, I would have saved myself a lot of problems if I'd have just stopped and thought about the next 24 hours after this statement. And so I could have played it out. I'd have been fine. I'd have not said it. So yeah, it's slow down and do what you said, is like empathize, right? And then ask her to empathize with you and be like, this is why I'm saying this, because we kind of had an agreement. And I know if it was roles were reversed, you might be feeling the same way I do, that kind of thing. Right. So yeah, I think empathy is a big player too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, all right, one more, and then we'll talk about where to go and check you guys out. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on weekly check-ins. I know you're probably big on some sort of check-in, and you probably have some sort of checklist that you guys can sit down, and some structure that creates a kind of helps you navigate that conversation. But how crucial, and give me an example in your life of maybe what it looks like, how often, what has it saved you from, or what has it sort of springboarded you guys into that's even healthier?
Oh yeah. So I would say weekly check-ins can springboard you into more check-ins, which is going to result in increased connection, increased relationship, and then like, oh, I didn't know that about you. Increased curiosity about where your spouse is. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they doing? Because we're all dynamic, right? Something like 2 years ago I might not be into now, and I'm into this new thing, right? I just got into bow hunting less than a year ago, and like I love it. I wasn't into that at all 2 years ago, but now I am. So that's another thing we can talk about and connect. Not that she has to love bow hunting, but it's just a point of conversation. But we do have this thing that Melanie created called the Power Couple Planner, right?
Yeah.
Dang it, it's over there on the other side of the studio. But it is designed for couples to be highly, highly intentional. And think about like how we use Google Calendar or Outlook or something like that at our jobs. We are highly intentional, right? Okay, I got a 2:00 meeting, a 3:00, 4. My spreadsheets are due at the end of the month. All this stuff, right? We do this. We do these things in our business life and our work life. Why not do those things in our marriage life? Because so many people make the mistake of, oh, we'll get married and it'll just be okay, right? No, you've been married for 28 years. I've been married for 19 years. We just didn't fall off a log because we're so in love, and 28 years later, things are great. No, we've had to fight for it and be intentional and have intentional conversations and make plans, right? So the Power Couple Planner goes beyond just the weekly check-in. It's like you sit down, typically on Sundays is when we do it, like Sunday evening or something, or Sunday morning before church, and plan out the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way to Saturday. Hey, how are we going to connect little micro connections during the day? And then what about our big connection, like a date night, a Friday or Saturday, or, hey, the kids are going to grandma's Saturday. Let's me and you go to, I don't know, the river and hang out, or go to the lake, or go see a movie or something like that. You plan those things out. And for us, some of the smaller connections might be like, oh, okay, Tuesday night, one kid has Taekwondo. I'll take her there. We'll come back, cook dinner together, 30 minutes cooking together, whatever. Other times might be, hey, Thursday evening, I'll be home all day. Let's meet you take a walk at 3 p.m. Okay, put that on the thing. Let's watch our favorite TV show. We like Forged in Fire. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but it's a pretty good show.
I've heard of it. Yeah,
knife making and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Hey, let's watch Forged in Fire Monday night. Okay, and we even go so far to plan intimacy. And a lot of people think, oh, that should be spontaneous and just free and whatever. Sure, yeah, you can do that too, but also it doesn't. So I give this example. There's a, maybe a new restaurant that opens up or something. Oh, we want to go there. We just can't go, right? We need a reservation. We need a plan. Now, if I say, hey, we got these reservations at 7 p.m. for this amazing restaurant, when we get to the restaurant and eat and, drink and have the dessert and all this stuff, does it make it any less appealing or less delicious because we planned it out? No. And scheduled sex doesn't make it any less fun, any less connecting, any less, intimate or anything. But a lot of people, me included, I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. But once you get into that groove, it's like, oh, this is intentional. This works pretty good, right? And then the Power Couple Planner also has, I think, like 100 date night ideas, over 250 conversation starters. Like a kind of a roundtable review of like, okay, how did we both do last week? Where were we? What was our assessment of the marriage? So it's kind of like a 360 review, like in the business world,
Yeah,
okay, I got my 360 review coming up. It's like, well, okay, that's a chance for you to rate yourself and also for your spouse to rate you, and then you have a conversation, you have feedback on it. So that is one way that we do it.
Now that is a healthy kind of scorekeeping.
Right.
When you're both like bought in as a team to assess the situation, each other, evaluate, open mind, right? No, take the gloves off type of deal. Nobody's trying to win. You're trying to win together. So that's a great point.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Trying to win together. That's, that's a good point.
Well, good, man. Man, I appreciate that. This has been, shoot, we could talk forever on this, but I appreciate you kind of scratching the surface for the audience and giving them, we're going to find out where to go to get more and dig deeper, and maybe how to. So tell us what you want us to go check out. If the guys were going to stop listening to this at the end and then go to your website, what's the one thing you would point them to first, maybe?
Yeah. Well, first of all, go to anatomyofus.com. That's anatomyofus.com. You'll see all of our stuff, a little backstory, links to the podcast. But I would go to the resources tab where we have a bunch of free PDFs, a couple, 20 questions to the best sex ever, how to pray with your spouse, how to lead prayer with your spouse. We got the power list on there. We have some other parenting resources. And of course, the Power Couple Planner resource, which is under the resources as well. Videos on how to use it, the tutorials and different stuff. We also do high performance marriage coaching, which is a 90-day process that couples can go through to go to there's all kinds of stuff that we work with on clients to heal or just to level up their marriage. Now, coaching, because it's so intense and like a lot of touch points, it's weekly meetings, it's Zoom calls, it's homework, it's all, constant contact. That's more of an investment, of course. Financially, that's more of an investment and a time investment. And for the ladies listening out there, they can go to Women's Group Coaching, which is a couple of groups that Melanie runs. They meet on Zoom calls. And then we are kicking off. I do have a husband's mastermind, but we're right now in the middle of a big rebrand, and we got some huge stuff going on, which I'm super excited about, like with in-person meetups and all kinds of stuff to help you be the best husband that you can be. But listeners can find all that stuff at anatomyofus.com or Anatomy of Us Pod on Instagram.
Wow. I mean, it's mind-boggling how many resources y'all have. I mean, I assume you're both involved in the content, but golly, you're just churning out good stuff left and right here. And then who knows where this is going? Because you said you're going to rebrand and do some things, some cool stuff. Well, I mean, if you guys get to the Houston area, man, let me know. I want to come say hi, meet you in person, whatever. But no, I appreciate you doing this, man. Audience, he has been Seth Studley. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.